Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We'll be getting started shortly, but we'll maybe wait a little bit for participants to join. And in the meantime, I encourage you to introduce yourselves on the chat. Just a note that you should select send to everyone when you send a message on the chat so that everyone can see your message. Thank you. But we'll just wait maybe another minute or so in case there are a few additional people who will join. So maybe we'll get started. Hello and welcome to everyone to this SDG 6 progress webinar on the means of implementation targets 6A and 6B. I believe this is the very last of the series this week, and many thanks to UN Water for organizing these. My name is Marina Takane. I work in the Water, Sanitation, Hygiene and Health Unit at WHO on the GLAAS initiative, the Global Analysis and Assessment of Sanitation and Drinking Water. And I'm the responsible officer for monitoring and reporting on these two targets. I'm here today with my colleague Fiona Gore, who is the team lead of the GLAAS initiative and the TrackBin initiative. And we'll be hearing more from her shortly. We're really happy and excited to be here with you today. We have some exciting updates as well as some useful information for you. And we also hope that this will be an opportunity for discussion and engagement. So once again, as we start getting into the content of the webinar, I encourage you to introduce yourselves on the chat and noting again that you should select send to everyone when you send the message so that everyone can see your message. All right, so let me start. Before we get into the content, I'm just going to show the video message from the UN Water Vice Chair, Kellyanne Naylor. Just one moment while I sort out Zoom.
Dear colleagues and friends of water, thank you very much for joining this webinar today to discuss progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 6. This webinar is part of a series of webinars taking place this month, each focusing on global progress towards a specific SDG 6 indicator and target. Before we get into the details, I wanted to share a few important messages about overall progress towards SDG 6 and how the UN is working together to report on our progress. We are now 6 years into the SDGs. And for the first time, we have water and sanitation data from almost all the countries in the world. This country data were compiled last year by the UN custodian agencies who joined forces under the UN Water Integrated Monitoring Initiative for SDG 6, or as we fondly call it, IMI SDG 6. The unprecedented level of reporting is a major accomplishment for us as a global community, but even more so for all the country focal points who are joining us in this webinar. On behalf of UN Water, I would like to thank all of you for your extra hard efforts in monitoring SDG 6 in your country this year, especially in the difficult times we've been all living through. When we look at this data, they sadly confirmed the tendency that we first saw in 2018, that we are off track to achieve sustainable water and sanitation for all by 2030. Taking a look at some of the hard facts about SDG 6, we see that billions of people worldwide still live without safe water and sanitation and basic hygiene services. Nearly 10% of the world's population still live in areas with extreme water stress. We know that wastewater is being released untreated into the environment, and 1 in 5 of the world's river basins are changing rapidly, which is exacerbated by changes in climate. We see that sustainable management of water resources remains out of reach for many countries. The data show that in order to meet our goals and targets, we are going to need to accelerate progress, and in some areas up to 4 times faster to be able to meet SDG 6 within the next 9 years. More than anything, we're going to need politicians and policymakers at all levels to be able to set bolder priorities and quickly. But the good news is that we already have a lot of sustainable solutions in place. Last year, UN Water launched the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework with the full backing of the UN family to mobilize action across government, civil society, and the private sector across the UN to be able to better align our efforts, optimize financing, and enhance capacity and governance. From our work with countries and from their data, we've learned a lot about opportunities for accelerating progress. We've learned about the importance of scaling up capacity building, coordinated action, mobilizing political will. And of course, we've learned how data and information can be used to better guide policy and decision makers in their work. Because despite these heroic monitoring efforts of the last year, we still see large data gaps. Our ambition and hope with this data and with our SDG 6 reports are to further encourage and support national and subnational data collection and ultimately help policy and decision makers to take informed action. This is what IMI SDG 6 will be focusing on as we go forward, and we call on the entire water community from global to local efforts to join us in taking this forward. I wish you a very fruitful and lively webinar today and very warmly welcome you to join the other indicator webinars that we're organizing this month. Thank you for your attention and for all of your continued efforts to drive progress towards our common goal to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Thank you very much.
So a great message from Kellyanne setting the context for SDG 6 monitoring. Just need to share my screen again. So thank you all again for joining this webinar today. For any participants who joined late, I encourage you to introduce yourselves on the chat, noting again that you should select send to everyone when you send your message. So here's an overview of what we have planned for the session today. Just to note that we're in a somewhat different position from the other SDG 6 indicators because we've not published a report this year, although we do have one planned for next year. So rather than a report launch, this webinar is really much more of a progress update on these two targets, 6A and 6B, and what is being planned for the upcoming data collection. So we'll start with a brief introduction, and in particular, trying to make the link between SDG 6 means of implementation and GLAAS. We'll be giving you a bit of a background on UN Water GLAAS, and followed by an update on the SDG 6 means of implementation targets 6A and 6B. And then we'll be giving you an overview of the upcoming GLAAS data collection. And we should have plenty of time for questions and answers. Actually, we'll have 2 question and answer sessions, one in the middle of the webinar and another at the end for any remaining questions. So regarding the monitoring of the SDG 6 means of implementation, I think even now there may be, less understanding of what we mean by the means of implementation. What we're referring to is the enabling factors such as financial resources, human capacity, governance, these elements which allow countries to make progress towards the outcome targets and the overall goal. So UN Water GLAAS, the Global Analysis and Assessment of Sanitation and Drinking Water, has been monitoring the enabling environment for water sanitation and hygiene since 2008. And this includes topics such as national targets, provisions for vulnerable populations, as well as finance, factors that contribute to countries making progress towards SDG 6. So the GLAAS country survey contributes to the monitoring of targets 6A and 6B, and it also very much complements other SDG 6 monitoring initiatives. We also have an in-depth study type of methodology called TrackFin on WASH finance in particular. The development of WASH accounts using the TrackFin methodology also contributes to the monitoring of 6A. Where target 6A focuses on external aid, the WASH accounts actually provides a much broader view of finance in the sector and looks at government spending as well as user contributions, and in fact looking at all WASH financial flows in the country and not just external aid. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Fiona, who will be giving a background on UN Water GLAAS. Fiona?
Thank you very much, Marina. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar. It's a pleasure for us to be with you today on this Friday. And I know for some of you, it's probably already Friday afternoon or even coming up to Friday evening. So we really appreciate it. So what I'm going to do in the first instance is just to provide a little bit of context. And we have been mentioning GLAAS. Some of you may be very familiar with the acronym GLAAS, but what does GLAAS stand for? Well, GLAAS is the Global Analysis and Assessment of Sanitation and Drinking Water, and it is implemented by the World Health Organization on behalf of UN Water. What does GLAAS do? What is the objective? Is basically to provide a global update on WASH systems, including governance, policy frameworks, institutional arrangements, monitoring systems, regulation, human resources, and as Marina mentioned, on finance. Next slide, please. And I encourage you all to really put your questions in the chat. I can see there's already a hand up, which I'm really excited about because it's always great to have interaction so early on. But I was wondering if it was somebody having technical problems or it was a question already. So, but we will have some opportunities to take questions and answer. So if that's a question, please leave your hand up. Now, moving on, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context of the work we do at WHO within the GLAAS initiative. And as Marina's already mentioned, there's the SDG monitoring aspect and reporting that is actually done through the GLAAS survey and the GLAAS data collection. And we produce, and this is our 6th cycle that is being launched right now, and we'll be going into that a little bit more in detail. And we produce a report and we will be producing a report towards the end of next year once we've gone through the data collection. As well, we're really pleased that we will be launching a GLAAS data portal, a user-friendly GLAAS data portal that Marina will take you through in more detail later on. But there's also another area of work that we'd like to emphasize, and that's the WASH accounts. And WASH accounts using the TrackFin methodology. So very early on, when we started with the GLAAS survey and data collection, really looking at inputs and processes, and basically the enabling environment for WASH, it seemed that there was a lot of gaps regarding finance. Therefore, we worked very closely with the health accounts and developed a methodology with the World Bank, OECD, and other experts around the world to develop a methodology to track financing in the WASH sector. Another area of work where we sort of dive deeper is basically around policy, and we developed a tool, which is the Policy Monitoring and Assessment tool. Another very important area of our work is the collaboration and partnerships. We work very closely, of course, with UN Water, but of course also with UNICEF. And we have close collaborations with the Sanitation and Water for All Partnership, SWA, who organize the high-level meetings on a regular basis, but also with WaterAid, AMCAO, IRC, and this is just to name a few. Next slide, please, Marina. The GLAAS data collection, sorry, I think you missed a slide maybe. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Marina. So the GLAAS data collection and reports, I mean, what are the purposes, the purpose and the objectives? And it's really to monitor, as I mentioned just earlier, the inputs and processes into the systems required to extend and sustain WASH systems and services to all, especially to the unserved and disadvantaged groups, but also to support country-led processes and that bring together the many institutions and actors and stakeholders involved in WASH. I think we're all very involved with the WASH sector. There are many actors in different institutions, across a variety of organizations and ministries. And the idea is really to identify the drivers, the successes, but also the bottlenecks of progress and where these items can be addressed, and for us to be able to highlight that through the GLAAS report and highlight knowledge gaps and assess strengths and challenges across countries worldwide. And finally, to analyze and highlight data from countries and also external support agencies in reports and produce country profile highlights and make this data accessible through the GLAAS data portal. One point I'd like to also mention here, not only do we do a country data collection, we also do an external support survey where we collect information from donors, bilateral agency, multilateral agencies, but also foundations to assess and highlight their priorities, their targets, and assess where the money is going, also using OECD data. Next slide, please. So this is just to share that we are currently going through and have just launched the data collection for this cycle, and we're planning a report for the end of next year. And the information that will be collected through this cycle and the report is expected towards the end of the year. What you can see on the bottom left here is the last report that we published in 2019, which really focused on national systems and the key elements of these national systems. And we had participation from 115 countries worldwide. And you can see those are the green countries highlighted on the map on the diagram bottom right. And we also had 29 external support agencies that participated in the last cycle, and those are highlighted in blue on this chart. Next slide, please. Just to mention a few the collaborations that we have at regional level, and in particular this collaboration in Africa with AMCAO. And AMCAO is the African Ministers' Council on Water. And we continue to work with AMCAO very closely. and particularly on their WASMO system. And the WASMO system is the African Water Sector and Sanitation Monitoring and Reporting System. And the indicators are aligned with GLAAS and the WASH accounts, the idea being to reduce the reporting burden at country level. And we also collaborate on the NGOR monitoring, and the GLAAS 2021 country survey contributes to and aligns with the NGOR commitments, which were defined back in 2015. Next slide, please. Another more a newer collaboration is with the Global Water Partnership, GWP, and the Southern African Water Investment Scorecard. And the information that will be collected through this current cycle of GLAAS will be used as a data source to inform the Water Investment Scorecard. And we are working very closely in collaboration with UNICEF, SWA, and AMCAL on these aspects of the scorecard. Now, the objectives of the Water Investment Scorecard is to enhance accountability for results in mobilizing of water investments in Africa, and sustain political and leadership commitment at the heads of state level for gender transformative and climate resilience water and sanitation investments for the achievement of SDG 6. Next slide, please. And just to mention a few other collaborations, for example, in Latin America, the evidence that is produced and the GLAAS findings that are presented can be used as evidence for the Latino SAN, so the sanitation conferences that occur every few years, and this, for example, in Latin America, but similarly in South Asia, SACOSAN, which is the sanitation conference that occurs every few years in South Asia. And lastly, in Europe, the GLAAS is in synergy with the Protocol on Water and Health and supports the setting of baselines and identifying national targets. Next slide, please. And another very critical collaboration globally is the collaboration with Sanitation and Water for All, SWA. And GLAAS is really the evidence arm of SWA and provides data for its results framework and helps inform the working groups that are part of SWA, including the Systems and Finance Working Group. And in addition, participating in the GLAAS data collection helps with preparatory work for the SWA high-level meetings, whether it be the WASH sector high-level meetings or the finance high-level meetings that take place every few years. Next slide, please. Now, what are the benefits of participating to countries themselves? Of course, GLAAS and the reports that we produce are global. It's a global monitoring mechanism, but the actual use to countries is the fact that not only does it provide a useful situation analysis of the WASH sector, but it also really helps a country identify the information gaps in the enabling environment and helps decision makers define the priorities and devise plans and really try and allocate available funding to those that need it most. It brings together different stakeholders together, and as mentioned by Marina, it also contributes to SDG 6 monitoring and regional monitoring initiatives that I've mentioned. So with that, I'd like to pass back over to Marina, who's going to take you through SDG 6 means of implementation, 6A and B, for a few slides. Thank you, Marina. Over to you.
Thank you, Fiona. So I'll be giving a quick overview of the means of implementation targets 6A and 6B, as well as the latest results. So just as background, I'm sure most of you have seen this diagram before, and this just gives a good overview of the SDG 6 global indicators and targets. So we have UN Water coordinating the monitoring of the targets and indicators under SDG 6 through the Integrated Monitoring Initiative. So we have under goal 6, we have the outcome targets 6.1 to 6.6. And then in the center, sort of trying to, push progress for all of these outcome targets. We have the means of implementation targets 6A and 6B. There are various agencies that contribute or who are responsible for the monitoring and reporting of these targets and indicators, including us, UN Water GLAAS for 6A and 6B. There's the WHO UNICEF Joint Monitoring Program, or the JMP for 6.1 and 6.2. And then the Integrated Monitoring Initiative really covers all of goal 6. Just to note that of the 11 indicators under goal 6, there are actually 5 indicators that are monitored by WHO in collaboration with co-custodians. And of course, from GLAAS, we are monitoring the targets 6A and 6B. On target 6A, in particular, so the target statement is by 2030 to expand international cooperation and capacity building support to developing countries in water and sanitation related activities and programs, including water harvesting, desalination, water efficiency, wastewater treatment, recycling, and reuse technologies. And the indicator used to monitor this target is the amount of water and sanitation related official development assistance that is part of a government coordinated spending plan. In the GLAAS country survey, we do have a question to monitor this indicator. So question D9, which looks at how external funding is channeled. The data that's used officially for reporting on this indicator actually comes from OECD. They have a big database on official development assistance through the creditor reporting system. And that is the main data source that's used for reporting to UNSD on this target. However, we do use the data from GLAAS to provide additional details and sort of context for the results that we see from OECD. On target 6B, the target statement says to support and strengthen the participation of the local communities in improving water and sanitation management. And the indicator linked to this target is the percentage of local administrative units with established and operational policies and procedures for participation of local communities in water and sanitation management. So for this target and indicator, the GLAAS country survey is the main source of data used for reporting. We have a question on this in the GLAAS country survey, question A11. While the scope of the GLAAS survey, speaking in general, is limited to water sanitation and hygiene, for the purposes of SDG 6 reporting, for this question, we've sort of expanded the scope to include integrated water resources management. In this cycle, we've also revised the question to include information on the percentage of the population, sort of population coverage of access to opportunities for participation, to try to get some additional information on how the population is able or not able to participate. And we have been progressively refining and improving this question on community and user participation across the past several GLAAS cycles. We've also conducted an in-depth study on target 6B, looking at refining the monitoring of this target and laying out a way forward for improving the monitoring and reporting of target 6B. We work very closely with UNEP and on their IWRM SDG 6.5.1 survey, where they collect complementary data on community participation. We've done some joint data analyses, sort of combining GLAAS and IWRM data on participation to try to get a fuller picture of the situation on community and user participation. We also work closely with OECD on this through their water governance initiative, and they have some complementary data that is collected through their water governance indicators. In terms of the latest monitoring data, so on 6A, what we see, according to the latest data from OECD, is that over the 5-year period from 2015 to 2019, official development assistance disbursements showed very little change at $8.8 billion US. Over the same period, ODA commitments rose modestly by around 9%. So this finding that disbursements have changed very little over the past, over this 5-year period from 2015 to 2019 is really quite concerning, especially in light of the finding from the last report that showed a large funding gap of 61% between what countries need to achieve their national WASH targets and the funding that they have available to them. So I think we all generally agree that increasing donor contributions to the water sector remains a crucial element to make progress towards Goal 6, in conjunction with greater and more efficient investments from the national government. Here in this map, we're looking at a geographical distribution of ODA and distribution by SDG region. So what we see here is that Sub-Saharan Africa received the largest share of ODA disbursements for the water sector at 34%. And in fact, disbursements to the region increased from 2.8 billion to 3.1 billion US dollars between 2015 and 2019. And this includes a pretty large increase of 58% in aid to large water and sanitation systems. This is a rather interesting result, looking at different types of aid flows to least developed countries. And what we see in this graph here is that concessional lending, which is the yellow line that you see in this graph, concessional lending in the water sector has increased by 52% from 2015 to 2019. At the same time, over the same time period, we see that ODA grants, which is the orange line, has only increased by 7%. And we see an overall sort of stagnation in the level of ODA grants, whereas ODA loans seem to be growing quite rapidly. So this is quite interesting, as you know, least developed countries by some measure are, you know, often those in greatest need, and also maybe among the most fragile in terms of their capacity to repay loans. So this is maybe a result for further thought. On target 6B, just to show some of the latest results from the last GLAAS cycle, just to explain, we collect data on community participation through the GLAAS survey, looking at 6 separate subsectors. So urban and rural drinking water, urban and rural sanitation, hygiene, and water resources planning and management. So what this map is showing here is the number of subsectors for which they are reporting clearly defined policies and procedures for participation of local communities. And so what we see is that there's a lot of blue. So a lot of countries reporting that they have these participation procedures clearly defined for 5 or 6 of the subsectors. So in fact, we had 2/3 of the 109 reporting countries. They said that they had participation procedures that are defined in laws or policies in all 6 water and sanitation subsectors. And this includes countries across Africa, Central and South America, in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. However, when we look at levels of participation, we only had 14 out of the 109 countries reporting high levels of community and user participation. So high levels of participation refers to collaborative management and decision-making. In general, most countries reported medium levels of user and community participation, which means that users are occasionally or regularly consulted, but not to the extent of collaboration or representation in decision-making processes. And so one possible reason is we found that implementation of participation procedures under SDG 6 is very much limited by a lack of financial and human resources. So we had approximately 6 in 10 countries reporting that human and financial resources were less than half of what they need to support community participation. And this situation was particularly critical in rural areas where over 3/4 of countries reported insufficient financial resources to support participation. So hopefully that provided a good overview and summary of what the current reporting is on these 2 targets. And I think we're just going to pause. We're just going to stop the presentations for a little while to take some of your questions.
Thank you, Marina. That's great. And I really encourage all of you participating today to introduce yourselves in the chat so we know who's here and what your function is. So thank you very much for that. I'm also really pleased to see that there's a person who was already this morning on the webinar has come back to a second time for the webinar. So thank you very much for that. And also I'm pleased to welcome our regional advisor from WHO PAHO in Latin America, and Patricia, so very glad you've joined us. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do see one hand up. And a question has come in from a colleague from Austria. So maybe, yes. So the question is, Marina, is it still possible to submit SDG indicator 6A and B data reports? I would submit the corresponding numbers A11 and BXX. I'm sorry, I don't remember either what the question is, in the GLAAS questionnaire next week. In line with the last Austrian GLAAS report, it is not foreseen to complete the entire GLAAS questionnaire for Austria. So thank you very much, Ernst, and it's great to have you with us today on this webinar. And in fact, I'm actually going to be talking a little bit further about the GLAAS process. And I think it would be absolutely wonderful for Austria to once again be part of the GLAAS survey. And there's actually plenty of time because we've just launched the new cycle. So we're hoping that Austria will not only be part of the country survey, because we encourage participation from all countries, irrespective of the level of income. But also, we are also hoping that Austria might be participating in the External Support Agency survey that will be launched at the beginning of next year. So Ernst, just to let you know, there is still ample time and opportunity. The GLAAS information and survey package is now online, available in English, in French and Spanish. The French and Spanish, I think we need to just maybe refresh the link. It's supposed to be up by today, but I just checked, it's still not there, but we certainly can provide the Dropbox links for the French, English and Spanish in the chat, and I will do that a bit further on. And they will all become available online very soon on the WHO website. There will also be the translations available in Russian, Arabic in the next couple of weeks, and Portuguese will be available at the beginning by, I would say at the latest, mid next week. So we're really pleased. We have information training modules available as well in English and French only, but I know that our colleagues in PAHO in Latin America will be conducting some trainings for the GLAAS focal points in the region. So thank you for that, Ernst. And I see, Daddy Ali, you've had your hand up since the beginning. So I just wanted to make sure with you that you wanted to maybe intervene. I didn't see you put any information in the chat. So I'm afraid I can try and unmute you in case you would actually like to say something. But I don't seem to have the opportunity to unmute you. Daddy Ali, if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat and maybe ask your question that you had, that would be great. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, but I see people introducing yourself. So thank you very much for that. And I see we have a range of participants from the different areas of the world, the Kingdom of Bahrain, Venezuela, Austria, Morocco, and I'm probably missing, I think Brazil as well, Venezuela. So a warm welcome to all of you, and I do encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Okay, I do. Oh, there's a new. Oh, yes, of course. And how could I forget? DRC, our colleague, Dr. Kabamba, who was already participating this morning. Dr. Kabamba, welcome back. And we've already been emailing in between both webinars, which is just absolutely wonderful. So welcome back. And I'm glad we've got interpretation for you in French for this particular webinar. So, oh, we've also got somebody from Chile, Mexico. That's just wonderful. So it's really wonderful to have this opportunity to be able to share today's information about the GLAAS process, the background, but most of all, the monitoring and reporting of SDG 6A and 6B. So with that, I think maybe, Marina, if you agree, shall we move on to the next part of the presentation?
Yes, I think that would be great.
Excellent. So next slide, please, Marina. So just to provide you all with a bit of context, we've been mentioning the GLAAS survey, the GLAAS data collection, and as Marina's just mentioned, this is data that we collect as part of the GLAAS package, and survey contributes to the SDG 6 monitoring and reporting. So I think this particular slide is going to be very telling, particularly to Ernst's question about the timeline for this current cycle. And we have finalized the PDF survey package online in English. And Marina, maybe if I can ask you if you could put the link to the website in the chat, that would be wonderful. And we can also put the Dropbox links with the currently Spanish, French, and English. The package will be available in 6 languages by hopefully week after next, including Russian and Arabic. We're working on it really hard. And we're also working in collaboration with our regional advisors at WHO around the world to organize trainings. Now we have information modules that are available in English and French. And there will be also a training that will be happening, as I mentioned earlier, in Latin America. So the idea for the data collection is to span over the next 6 months, but depending on the region, that deadline may be sooner or later. For example, in Latin America, I think the deadline is going to be slightly shorter, but ultimately we hope to have received worldwide from all countries participating in the GLAAS cycle by the end of March, so the 1st of April of 2022. But I do note that the countries in Latin America who are participating in the GLAAS focal points by country will be expected to submit by the end of this year or a little bit sooner. The idea is that we will then have a period where we will be reviewing the GLAAS survey submissions and exchanging and interacting with the focal points on data quality assurance in case that's, any questions that arise. And the idea being that we would produce the GLAAS 2022 report and the data being available on the GLAAS data portal at that point towards the end of next year. But as I mentioned earlier, the GLAAS data portal is being launched in the next few days, and we'll be really happy to be able to share with you through UN Water the link to the GLAAS data portal phase 1. Next slide, Marina, please. So just to give you a little bit of some insights into the updates that we've done to the GLAAS country survey. We have developed some more comprehensive questions on hand hygiene. Of course, we've all been living through the pandemic, and the hygiene issues have become absolutely critical with COVID-19. And we have tried to focus the questions on in order to get more focused information, not just on hygiene promotion, as has been in the past, but really focused down on hand hygiene practices. And there's also a new question on WASH in COVID-19 preparedness and response plans. We've also revised quite significantly the human resource section, which previously was maybe a little shorter, but we've now expanded and worked quite hard on that section. As in previous cycles, the GLAAS survey format is a fillable PDF. And I think we're really pleased, and I'm going to jump to my last bullet point, to say that we're piloting an online version of the GLAAS country survey, the eGLAAS. Now, this is very new, and it's very much based on feedback from the 2018 and 19 GLAAS cycle. And we got a number of countries, and I must say a number of countries from South America and Latin America who said, why don't you collect data online? And yes, we have tried in the past to develop an online data collection tool, which unfortunately was not successful. And hence we have been using in previous cycles, we have used Word document, which we agree is not very modern. So we're trying to become even more modern. We then developed the fillable PDF, and we are now moving towards piloting an eGLAAS. We're hoping worldwide to have between 10 and 15 countries fill out the GLAAS survey online on this data platform. The platform will be available in English and in Spanish only. And for further information, please contact the GLAAS email or the regional advisors. And particularly for the Spanish-speaking countries that are interested, please get in touch with the PAHO regional advisor, Patricia Segurado, who is actually on this webinar. So don't hesitate to ask her questions directly. That would be absolutely wonderful. And just to say that we have streamlined and refined the guidance document, and we have tried to make it a lot shorter and focus on the questions where we felt there could be some confusion or where clarification was needed, and ensuring that we provide the adequate definitions. Some of you have become experts in the GLAAS data collection and cycles, and so we really welcome you to take part in this. And I know that we have our expert, Dr. Kabamba, from DRC, who has been trained in the past cycle and who is with us again today. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the next slide. What I'd like to do in the next few slides is just maybe give you a little bit of an insight into the process of the GLAAS data collection process. And essentially, there's 7 key steps. So taking you to the next slide. And this is what has been happening, is really about introducing GLAAS. I mean, at this point, I think there's still a lot of people who might not be aware at country level. And the idea is really to raise awareness of what we are trying to do here and what we've been trying to do since its pilot in 2008. And since then, we're in our 5th cycle. So essentially the 6th cycle with the pilot. And the idea and the way it happens is that there has been exchanges among WHO country offices and our regional offices worldwide. And we have worked very closely with UNICEF and with government representatives and key stakeholders to assess the interest in the GLAAS process. We have now a number of countries that have confirmed their interest in participating in the GLAAS process. And I really feel that the next few slides are very much for you as participants in your respective roles in different countries to get involved and to find out how to get involved. Next slide, please. And so the decision and the GLAAS process is really essentially led by the government. And they identify a national focal person that's preferably from within a lead WASH ministry or department to be the main coordinator of the GLAAS process. And then the next step has been and is currently being done, identify resource needs and outline a brief work plan. We do have some seed funding, so a small amount of funding to provide to countries to be able to organize an inception meeting, to hire a national consultant to help with the data collection. And we also are very grateful to our partners, and notably UNICEF, who has also pledged to contribute some support towards this. Next slide, please. The next step is really, and I think this is one of the key essential steps, and I might maybe pause on this particular slide a little longer than the others, but it's really before the data starts getting collected for the actual survey, is to identify the key stakeholders to include in the process. And we, I think, all know that the WASH sector is very fragmented and that there's different roles and responsibilities. And the GLAAS survey covers a number of issues that may lie with responsibility with different institutions, different ministries. And so it's really to consider including in the process, of course, the WASH line ministries, but also very importantly, the National Statistics Office and the Ministry of Finance. And the Ministry of Finance is extremely important, but of course also the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the drinking water and wastewater, regulators, the ministries of water resources, and of course these different ministries have different names in different countries, but also to include the partners, to include the in-country development partners, including donors, NGOs, and really casting a wide net, but also including the private sector. And lastly, I think we all understand and know that there's several focal points for various initiatives in country, and it's really to try and bring together the various and involve and include and inform, for example, the SDG 6 focal point in country, such as yourselves, the SWA focal point. There's also an assigned person at the National Office of Statistics, an SDG focal point at the NSO. And it's really to try and bring those various people together to avoid unawareness or confusion and to bring the processes together. I know that's easier said than done, but in many cases, actually, the SWA focal point is very often the same focal point as the GLAAS one, in which case it makes the work easier. Next slide, please, Marina. So what's the next step after that? Is really to try and gather the information since the last GLAAS survey and data collection effort. So any relevant sector documents, reports, new policies or plans or strategies that have been developed. And then it's to prepare the GLAAS data collection. And as I mentioned earlier, to organize an inception report, an awareness inception report to get everyone involved, to assign roles and responsibilities, because there will be one person maybe responsible for filling out the information on hygiene with colleagues, and another focal point that will be in charge of facilitating the sanitation section or the wash and healthcare facilities, etc., etc. So it's really to try and sort of organize an inception workshop, to organize who does what and where, and to discuss the actual data collection process with the government and key stakeholders. And of course, because of the pandemic, having in-person meetings, we're in a very different situation than we have been in the past, where we've had in-person trainings, of course, and that there was organization of meetings were possible, as currently, I think, still very challenging and difficult. Next slide, please. And then there's the data collection phase, which is an important phase, but not the only one. I think the preparation phase and the steps that I've just discussed are equally important. But then when we get to the data collection phase, the national focal point coordinates the responses to the GLAAS survey from the various stakeholders. And then it can be organized in different shapes and formats in different countries. And we've seen different ways, and it really depends on what is decided in the first meeting and how roles and responsibilities have been assigned. So there's not one format fits all. So there can be ongoing meetings or discussions among the various stakeholders to complete the individual sections. Next slide, please. But one important thing, and we often, and I've mentioned this, I mean, of course, there's a number of stakeholders that will, and we encourage a high number of stakeholders to be involved. And the discussion around the information is as important as the information and results themselves. And it's really critical to organize a sort of final review meeting to discuss the results. And if there's disagreements, but that's okay. It's actually about having exchanges and being able to come to a consensus of what should be submitted. But having the more people involved than not is key. Once that has happened, the government reviews the final data that has been decided on with the wide stakeholder meeting and signs off on the results before submission. Next slide, please, Marina. And then the next part is the submission of the GLAAS country survey documents. So the national focal point will be responsible for submitting the actual survey with the results, the country feedback form. And we've updated the country feedback form to really sort of gain information on the data use. The idea is really to make sure that the data that's being collected is useful at country level for decision making. And we want to get some insights of how we can improve the survey as we move forward, and what kind of information is needed, and actually how it's being used. Because also, but it's all about trying to integrate this type of information in national monitoring and reporting systems. And lastly, also in some regions, there will also be a separate consent form to make sure that we as WHO are in a position to use the data that has been submitted for the reports and to put online on the data portal. As I mentioned earlier, there is now a 6 months data collection phase with a deadline on the 1st of April 2022, bearing in mind that there are different timelines that are being coordinated in different regions based on available funding to support the processes. And so that will be very much, I know that in PAHO and the Latin American countries, the deadline is sooner. Next slide, please. So after submission, or when a country survey has been submitted, our team will be reviewing the responses, and we will follow up with the focal point if there are any additional clarifications needed, and that will then be incorporated into the data portal once it's finalized to be able to produce the GLAAS country highlights. Now, this is actually quite a big difference between we used to produce country highlights manually, and although there was some automation to them, but now these will actually be automated through the data portal and can actually be customized by the users. So I think I'll let Marina mention that a bit later on, but we're pretty excited about that. Next slide, please. So just to re-emphasize that once we've received the country survey results, we will be compiling those and compiling them into the GLAAS 2022 report, which is expected towards the end of next year. It will be available on the website, and the data will also be published on the GLAAS data portal. And yes, on the data portal, as I was saying, users will be able to generate customized country highlights, country profiles, as well as other data analysis and download GLAAS data sets and also previous data sets. Now, given the increased emphasis on country use of data, as I was mentioning earlier, we may be following up on specific information provided by countries in the country feedback forms, and we really look forward to being able to do that. And with that, that was my last slide. I'm now going to pass over for some exciting news, and Marina is going to talk to us a little bit more about the GLAAS data portal. Thank you, Marina, over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. As Fiona mentioned, this is a development that we're very excited about. We've been working on this GLAAS data portal over quite intensively over the past several months. I think up until now, we have been making the GLAAS data available publicly each cycle by posting a very large Excel file on the GLAAS website, which is not really the most interactive or user-friendly way of making the data available. So we're really very excited, and I think it's really quite revolutionary for the GLAAS initiative to be able to offer the GLAAS data in a much more interactive and easily obtainable format. So the GLAAS data portal will allow users to interactively explore and download data sets by topic area. It will also allow users to visualize key indicators and also to search for GLAAS and national documents. So in addition to GLAAS reports, the GLAAS country highlights and ESA highlights will also be storing national documents such as national WASH policies and plans that countries submit to us along with their GLAAS survey. As Fiona mentioned, I think one big feature of the site, which actually hasn't been developed yet, but we're currently in the process of developing, with the vendor is this automated generation of GLAAS country highlights. So we hope not only to make the data available in a format that's much more easily digestible by users in countries, and also to make it customizable to the user needs. But we're also hoping very much to streamline the QA process for the data, the quality assurance process. I think up until now, we've often had multiple rounds of quality assurance communications with regional colleagues and with countries. And we hope to really reduce that down by including any questions for clarifications that we have on the survey responses, as well as the country highlights, sending them all at once to countries through our regional colleagues. So this is our big plan for this current GLAAS data collection cycle, is to be able to provide the country highlights through the data portal. We also plan for this development of country highlights on the data portal to very much reduce the time for generating the highlights. So basically, once a country submits their GLAAS data, within a very short time, it should be possible to generate their country highlight through the data portal for them to review before it's made public. Currently, the data portal includes data from the GLAAS country surveys from the past 3 cycles. So from 2013-14, 2016-17, and 2018-19. So the data portal that will be launching in the phase 1 data portal that will be launching in the next few days will be based mostly on this GLAAS country survey data from the past 3 cycles. However, we're currently in the process of adding additional data. So the data from the external support agency surveys, as well as wash accounts data, will be added progressively over time, over the next few months. And we'll also be adding additional features over time. So we hope that you will take a look at the GLAAS data portal once it launches in the next few days. But also we hope that you'll keep coming back to see additions to the data, as well as additions to the functionality of the site. And we plan for the full data portal with all of the features to be launched by the end of this year. So as Fiona mentioned, the site is not quite yet launched. It's completely ready. We're just waiting for our WHO IT colleagues to do the necessary steps to make it live. But we're happy to share the link and any other information through our UN Water colleagues going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. And now I'd like to invite you to ask any questions, to give us any feedback, any statements. I don't see any questions for the moment in the chat. Maybe I'll give the opportunity to you all to write your questions in the chat or to raise your hand. Patricia, would you like to say anything? And of course you can speak in Spanish because we have interpretation today. So I think we need to take opportunity because I see you've indicated some information in the chat. Perfect, Patricia. I'm going to try and unmute you, but I seem to be having a bit of trouble. I was able to do it this morning. Oh, here we go.
Ok, gracias, Fiona.
De nada.
Ok. Bueno, sí, tenemos en América vamos a iniciar el ejercicio GLAAS. Ya hemos enviado a los países todos los formularios en diferentes idiomas. En español ya están. Eh, También estamos en proceso de desarrollar los entrenamientos en los países. Eso van a ser la próxima semana. Empezamos con el Caribe. El martes seguimos con Centroamérica y luego, perdón, con Sudamérica y luego con Centroamérica el miércoles. Bueno, estamos con muchas expectativas, esperamos poder llegar con todo el proceso. Ya se hicieron los contratos de los consultores donde se requería consultor. En algunos países, bueno, ya tienen ellos las capacidades desarrolladas los países y ellos están desarrollando sus propios clases. Y en Centroamérica también se ha venido trabajando el TrackFin y te están participando por lo menos 11 países de la región, incluido México y Argentina en TrackFin. Y eso también es un aporte para el GLAAS que nos permite tener mejor información de la situación financiera. Así es que, bueno, estamos entusiasmados con este proceso, Fiona, y vamos adelante. Gracias.
Gracias, Patricia. Wonderful. I won't continue in Spanish, sorry. But thank you for that information. And I hope all of you that don't speak Spanish were able to log into the right interpretation to understand. But things are moving very fast in the Latin America region, and we're really excited about that. We remain at your disposal for any questions, any support. And as mentioned by Patricia, there are a number of countries engaging on the WASH accounts using the TrackFin methodology in Latin America. Just to give a little bit of background, Brazil was part of the pilot back in 2013, 12-13, along with Morocco and Ghana. And since then, there have been a number of countries that have engaged in developing WASH accounts, which is a process that takes somewhat longer than a GLAAS process. But maybe we can also add in the chat, we have published a report back in June on reflecting on nearly 10 years of the implementation of WASH accounts. Using the TrackFin methodology with it's a short-ish report, which provides some insight on the lessons learned, some of the challenges, but also some of the successes of trying to refine the information of tracking expenditure in the WASH sector. I think there's many countries are interested. We are collaborating very closely with UNICEF on supporting WASH account development, also the World Bank in Morocco, and a new initiative to support Morocco in developing a new cycle of WASH accounts. And we have a number of countries also engaging in this effort. Now, just to note the link between GLAAS and WASH accounts, and the reason we developed WASH accounts, as I said earlier in my presentation, is the fact that we realized there was very little information on finance in the WASH sector back 10 years ago. And very often countries come to the section D on finance in the GLAAS survey, and there are a lot of challenges in filling out and a lot of gaps in information, which is fine. But this can be a first step. That the GLAAS information really provides a snapshot of the situation. If a country then decides, well, we actually have a lot of gaps in this area, then decide, well, we actually need to address these gaps. One way of addressing these gaps is to start developing WASH accounts, and support can be available. And please get in touch with us. Please get in touch with our colleagues at UNICEF at country level, but also at regional level. And we are here to discuss and support how we can engage. But Marina's just put the link to the Reflecting on TrackFin report in the chat. I encourage you all to take a look at what we think is a very exciting report of really reflecting objectively on this work over the last 10 years. With that, I'm just trying to see if there's any questions. I think that the question from Griselda was answered by Patricia, if I'm not mistaken. Are there any more questions that you would like to raise? Marina, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to, well, I wanted to answer Griselda's question because I wasn't sure if Patricia had fully addressed it. I mean, sorry, based on my Google Translate of the Spanish question, if I understood correctly, is when will all the data for the new GLAAS cycle be available? So I think the country highlights will be available online through the data portal progressively as countries submit their data and they validate and review their country highlight. Once they've approved, we can release their data online. If you're looking for the full data set, I think this is likely to take a little bit longer. As Fiona mentioned earlier, our submission deadline is the 1st of April. And I think from past experience, generally, it takes a little bit of time, usually a few weeks, to complete the processing of data following the submission deadline. So probably in the 2nd or 3rd quarter of 2022, we can, you know, either release a full data set, or we may, depending on the launch date of the next GLAAS report, we may need to coordinate with that. So just to give you an idea of when the full data set will be available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. Obviously, I should have used Google Translate instead, so I'm glad you did. Excellent. Great. Okay, so I actually think if there are no further questions, I do see that Daddy Ali has his hand up still, and I do not seem to have the functionality to be able to change that. But oh, I see a question, Dr. Kabamba. So I'm actually going to speak in French now. So maybe you have to, I'll give you the opportunity to change the channel. So I'm going to respond to the question that Dr. Kabamba in the chat has asked, if the version of the French, the TRACFIN document is available in French. Dr. Kabamba, bienvenue. Merci d'être venu au 2e webinaire aujourd'hui, fantastique. Alors, merci pour votre question dans le chat et de savoir si la version française du document TRACFIN est disponible. Actuellement, il n'est pas disponible en français, malheureusement, mais nous prévoyons de le traduire. Et nous espérons avoir une traduction, je pense, pas d'ici la fin de l'année, mais en début d'année prochaine. Par contre, j'espère que vous le savez sans doute, parce que vous avez participé très activement au dernier cycle GLAAS. Le dernier rapport GLAAS, évidemment, est disponible en ligne en français. Mais effectivement, le document TRACFIN, pour l'instant, n'est pas disponible en français, mais on va travailler pour le traduire. C'est vrai que là, on est assez occupé avec le lancement du GLAAS. Mais c'est absolument, je pense, important qu'on puisse avoir ce document en français. Donc, merci pour votre question, merci de votre engagement. Et voilà. J'espère que ça répond à votre question. Je vais repasser en anglais et je sais que je ne dois pas le faire trop vite parce qu'il faut que les personnes puissent et les interprètes puissent suivre. Okay, so I'm going back into English. I would like to basically, we're going to finish a bit early, which I think is probably welcome. We'd like to thank you very much for your participation, for your questions and engagement. As you can see on the slide, we have the main email address that you can contact us on. Marina and I and a couple of other people are also connected to that email, so we respond relatively quickly. And we would like to thank you all for being here today on a Friday. I think it's been quite a long week this week for everyone. Including our UN Water colleagues who've organized this wonderful series of webinars. So first of all, I'd like to thank our UN Water colleagues for providing the platform, for providing the organization and planning for this. I'd like to thank the interpreters because I think they do a really difficult but critical job. I'd like to thank all of you that have participated, that some of you from the Kingdom of Bahrain, of course, it's actually quite late there. So we really appreciate some of you joining at different times, and also for joining twice. I think that's just means dedication, and we think that's wonderful. So with that, I would like to maybe allow Marina to say a few words, and after that we'll close the webinar early. Marina, over to you.
Thank you, Fiona. Just to echo what Fiona said, we're just extremely thankful for all of you for having joined the webinar today. It's always such a pleasure to interact with people from different regions and from different countries. And to get your direct questions and feedback on the work that we're doing. So it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you again so much to all of you for joining and for participating. I believe the webinar recording will be made available online, as well as the slides through the UN Water website, I believe. The slides will be available on the UN Water website. Okay.
Everything.
Everything. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So with that, thank you again to everyone, and we hope to be able to interact with you again soon. Wishing you a great day and a great weekend, and hope to see you soon.
Muchas gracias. Au revoir, merci.
Thank you.
Adios. Bye-bye. Thank you.